Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Bright Line podcast, Tales from Recovering Food Addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice. Today we are going to talk about food. Which is funny in a podcast about food addiction that we're going to talk about food. But It is very important that we do address the fact that we do need to eat.
Yes, we do.
I think that I've heard
drug you have to have a little bit of.
That's right. I've heard Bonny say this all the time. I remember even back in the day, way before BLE, you would just make the comment about like alcoholics can stop drinking.
Right.
You know, drug addicts can stop taking drugs, but food addicts can't stop eating. And you never use the word food addict, but but in essence, we can't stop eating. We have to eat to nourish our bodies. Like that is very important to keep being alive. So we are going to talk about food and food prep and cooking and going out to eat and eating with other people and what that looks like as somebody who is a food addict and part of the Brightline community and how we navigate those. So Bonny, do you want to start and talk about, because you live with another BLEer, so
I do.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So.
Yeah, our food prep is actually really easy because we eat the same food, first of all. If you're doing BLE and other people in your family aren't, that's a whole next level. But food prep is a lot easier. We actually are pretty boring with the food. We pretty much eat the same breakfast every single day and the same lunch every single day. So it is not really necessary to write it down. So we probably go to the grocery store twice a week. And we buy huge bags of every vegetable and every fruit. I always joke when I get to the line because the poor checker has to, they're just checking all these vegetables. And it's so weird. I eat every vegetable, so it's like, the rutabaga and the whatever, and they're like, what is it? And it's like, I feel really bad. It's like my basket is the checkout final exam or something for the checker. But so we load up on all the vegetables we're going to need for lunch and dinner and all the fruits we're going to need for breakfast and lunch for the week. And we really eat the same foods. We just swap out the meat. Right. We just rotate through the meats. And we go every 3 months and we buy all of our meat from a butcher shop. And it's just prepackaged already in the weights that we want.
Nice.
I'm very lucky that we can afford to do that. That's challenge. If you're on a budget, that's harder.
Yes.
But we save money by doing that because we're not buying it on the fly and nothing goes bad because we have a list, we know what we're going to get, and we get the same batches of meats and we put them in a deep freeze. And so every night we just rotate through the meats. It's not even a decision. We don't say, what are we going to have tomorrow? It's like tomorrow's chicken night because it's in the rotation. So we pull the chicken out and, put it in the fridge for the next day. So that's our food prep. And we, a lot of people that are new to BLE or hearing about BLE and haven't taken the plunge yet, will say, oh my gosh, that's so much work, all the cooking. Like we just go out to eat. We don't have time for that. And I think back like when we used to eat out all the time, which we ate out for guys every meal. I
remember you used to say that it cost you guys less to eat out than to make the food. And I was like,
no, it doesn't. Yeah, that was a cop-out. But what's interesting is we spend a lot of time driving to the restaurant and waiting. You're waiting on the waiter to come, and then you're waiting on the food to be made, and then you're waiting for the check, and you're waiting. And you know what? Our food prep and actually preparing fresh food at dinner time does not take as long as that takes. And so we have come, again, because we're doing it together, it's kind of our time together when we cut the vegetables and make the food. Now, sometimes he's working out of the house for the day and I'm also working, and then I have to kind of prep in the morning or prep the night before, cut all the veggies the night before because I know I'm going to be short on time. So it has to be kind of planned. But, we pretty much just slice and roast vegetables and we roast meat. And that's it. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple. It really is. People don't need to be overwhelmed by the food prep.
Yeah.
So a good couple of knives, a good cutting board, scale.
Yeah.
roasting pan.
Yeah.
Well, scale is number one. That's the first thing you need to buy.
Yeah.
If you buy nothing else when you
you'll
decide
need
to
the
do
scale.
it, you have to have the food scale.
You know, we make the food in bulk, and we've gotten really good at figuring out pretty much how many broccolis, cauliflowers, and Brussels sprouts are going to end up being 10 ounces or however many ounces of veggies we need. We usually, for dinner, just mix salad and a hot vegetable. And like I said, we can kind of eyeball roughly how it's going to come out. Then we make the hot vegetables, we split them in 2 portions, weigh them out, and then we just have salad, make salad to make up the difference.
Yeah.
We do some air frying of some vegetables, which makes it a little sexier. You got to be careful with that, but a little more interesting. And sometimes a little simpler because I'll have a meat in the oven and then I can have something in the air fryer.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our meal prep. It's pretty straightforward. And it's just, I know some people really get into fun recipes like Meagan. Meagan is a more adventurous cook than I am. And I mean, her mom has a whole site where they post fun recipes and stuff.
It's my mom. It's not me. It's my mom.
But we're pretty basic in the cooking department. We get a little creative every now and then, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
Well, no, I think the thing is that I think there's 2 schools of thought, right? It's some people really need that simple food. They need the, simple food that maybe just has like some spices or whatever that's cooked in, a spritz of oil or whatever the case might be. And other people really love cooking. Like they love the recipes. Yeah. And my mom is one of those people. I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, like her love language is food. Like that is her love language. And thankfully now she speaks a really healthy love language of healthy BLE food. And it, no fault of her own. Like she's a wonderful cook. But the reality is that if you like to cook and being told that you can't do your recipes and that kind of cooking anymore, I think that'd be really hard.
Absolutely.
So I think, and that was one of the things that when I first started BLE, and I was talking to my mom because my mom started after I did, is that I was like, there is nothing out there. Every other food program out there, you can go and you can Pinterest search, the name of the program, be it whatever, keto or Atkins or whatever other program you're doing, and you can come up with 100 gojillion recipes. BLE, nothing, not a big fat goose egg. And so that was part of the reason why when her and I started talking about recipes and BLE-izing things, it was like, let's create some recipes that are out there for people that are searchable when they're looking for bright line recipes. So I will talk a little bit about my food strategy. I have a little bit different situation. So my spouse has not been doing BLE, and then I have kids. So, that's obviously there's a lot of people that are in that same situation as me. I also have another unique factor is that my spouse is our stay-at-home parent. And so I don't cook us dinner every night. And I understand that that is unusual, that a lot of people in this program are not in that situation. But I will tell you how we strategize our food. I take care of breakfast and lunch myself, and I pretty much eat the same thing every day. There's a few, swap outs that I do for lunch, but breakfast is generally always the same thing. But then dinner, when I first started the program, I basically talked to my husband and I said, look, I just need a protein that's not, been battered and fried or anything like that, and a cooked vegetable. Again, no flour, no sugar. Like he knew the parameters, and so that's what he would make. He would make the protein and a vegetable for me, and then I would supplement with salad, kind of the same that you guys do. And so it just really, it was easy. I honestly think it improved the way he ate because he started eating that. Not that he wouldn't have something else that was non-BLE, on the side, which is fine. I mean, and again, like for our kids, it's like they're gonna have the things that they're gonna have, but that's not the food that I'm gonna eat. And so you either do the one thing sometimes that we do, which is you make 2 different meals. You make the meal for your kids, whatever they're gonna eat, and then you make the meal for the adults, or you make everything's just simple, and you make the big meal for everybody. And I think that's the one benefit of the recipes that I've heard people say, that they can make, the meatloaf, the Not My Mom's meatloaf, which my mom adapted. Now it is my mom's meatloaf.
Oh, I love it.
But they can make that meatloaf recipe and their whole family will eat it. And so, that's the other thing is that, you got to make it work for the food prep. You need to make it work for your lifestyle. And so I don't grocery shop like Bonny does. We actually grocery shop at Costco in bulk because we go through a lot. We also go through a lot of fruit and veggie. 4 people eating, and our kids that consume fruit like it's going out of style. So I always joke because it's like half my cart is produce when I pull up at the Costco line. So we also buy our meat in bulk because we are on a budget, and so we just we make sure that we be as economical as we can be with it. But I think there's definitely ways. I mean, people talk about this is the other thing, and just kind of touch on this topic that this is more expensive. Like people say that, oh, this is so expensive to eat healthy, and it's like, okay, number one, you're portion controlling. So I would actually argue that if you're actually portion controlling the way that we are in BLE, it might actually be less expensive because you're going to measure stuff out and you're not going to waste as much food.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't waste any food.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about all the times when I get on a jag and we're going to be healthy and I go buy a bunch of vegetables and stuff and they would rot in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
I don't throw any food away. I basically we cook dinner. And then meats and vegetables, whatever's left over, that is part of my lunch the next day. That's just my plan. I add in carrot sticks and tomatoes to fill in whatever vegetables don't come from the night before. Meat is usually left over from the night before.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, I don't waste, and I used to waste a lot of food, but I'm going to speak to that comment about the price because I will tell you, grocery prices have gone up.
Oh,
and you know what? Buying a giant bag of frozen chicken nuggets and frozen French fries or tater tots to feed your whole family is about $5. Buying fresh fruits and vegetables is more. It is more expensive to eat healthy.
True.
And part of the movement in BLE, I hope over time, is going to be to work toward people that live in food deserts.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to be a meal plan that's just for privileged people that can afford better food.
Right.
Because the reality is super cheap food, super low nutrient food is cheap.
Right.
And you can fill up on a bag of chips and cookies and things like that are not healthy.
Sure.
Much more cheaply than buying, fresh fruits and vegetables. Fruits particularly. I mean, my favorite apple, which is the Cosmic Crisp, which is a new variety, right? In the winter, late winter, I went to buy them and they were like $3.50 an apple.
Ooh.
I mean, that's nuts. That's nuts. So there is a reality I want to acknowledge here.
Yeah. Sorry. And I wasn't trying to be.
And I've heard a criticism that BLE is for privileged old white ladies, and I just think the reality is we are talking about doing something that does cost more money, and you have to get creative. Now, I've seen people on sites, BLE sites, talk about some food prep, like going to Costco, they get a giant bag of mixed frozen vegetables, lay those out and roast them for the week. And so there are ways to do this, but it takes more work.
Takes some creativity.
It takes some
creativity.
creativity and a lot of planning.
And planning. Well, and I think it takes planning anyway.
Yeah.
I think anyway you have to plan because to have your refrigerator full of fruits and vegetables, and I think a lot of people supplement like frozen food, fruit and and even
10-ounce bags of mixed frozen vegetables is a lot of times on my menu.
And I think even canned fruits and vegetables are okay. Like it's just no sugar, no flour. It's not like you can't have those things, and you can't even find some convenience items that work, that work within the program. It's just, I just think back in the day of when we would go to the store and we'd buy all this food, and especially vegetables, and you're like, oh, we're gonna eat all this stuff, and then it would rot in the fridge because we would never use it, and don't.
Secret, guys, it's because the vegetables didn't taste good back then.
Yeah.
Because your mouth was addicted to the sugar. Yeah. And it's so interesting because, I mean, my kids I feel so bad, right? Because I didn't find this till my kids are now young adults, and they're like, you never made us eat vegetables. And I'm like, that's because we didn't eat vegetables. We just didn't. And I didn't like the way they tasted, and now I love the way they taste. So it's just a weird thing. And I promise, if you can do this after about 4 weeks on this plan, all the food tastes different. All of the real food tastes delicious.
Yeah.
And if you accidentally have a bite of fake food, it tastes gross.
Yes.
It's very interesting. But anyway, I digress.
No, that's totally fine.
But that piece about the vegetables rotting in the refrigerator,
so
right?
many times.
I always joke about, how's your emotional support cucumber,
Yeah.
rotting in the fridge.
Yeah.
Right. It's that cucumber that we all swore we were going to eat it back
Yeah.
before we started on the BLE thing. And
when you're
it just
planning
went to
your
mush.
food, right? When you're planning your meal prep and you're planning out your meals for the week, you won't waste it because you're going to eat it. And I mean, part of the deal is, and the reason that, they talk about writing your food down the night before is because it eliminates that emotional food choice about what you want. And it just becomes, all right, it's just dinner and I plan to eat this. And this is what I'm going to eat. And it's not a drama about, is it going to be the most delicious thing I've ever eaten? Or is it going to fill my dopamine, receptors or whatever? It's just like, that's what I'm eating tonight, So it's, it makes it easier too.
Yeah. And I think that also there are, people do batch cooking. There's a lot of people that do. They call themselves the food factories, which I think is super cute. That do, basically weekly food prep.
Google BLE weekly food prep and you'll find some really fun videos of people spreading out on their counter.
And there's lots of videos and, there's lots of
Right.
recipe ideas. I mean, I think there's a couple of cookbooks, there's some resources out there, but that's another way to help, save money if money is an issue, is by batch cooking and batch preparing things. So, we also wanted to talk about eating out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and the pitfalls and maybe successes of that. And the first thing I will say is it is highly recommended when you first start the program that you don't eat out for a while if you can avoid it. You know, Susan says 30 days, and I don't know that there's a prescribed amount. She says 30 days.
I don't think I ate out because again, I had been an eat out all the time, and I definitely got my dopamine hit from NMD as well as NMF. Going out to eat was my thing. So I've had a hard day. I deserve these things, right? So we avoided it for quite a while. And by the time we did, I will tell you, you know, of multiple restaurants that I have in my little town, there's really only 2, and there's only one thing I would eat at each one that really are fully BLE compliant. And it tends to be like a big salad and steamed vegetables. And I don't really like doing it anymore because you know what? I make a really good salad at home because I have so many different vegetables here. And so it's kind of like, it used to be the dopamine hit of the century for me to go out to eat. I just, you know, it was the thing at the end of the day that just, you know, really hit it for me. And now it's like, I'm like, you know, if friends want to go out to eat around, it's like, all right, I guess we can go out to eat. But it's just, since I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I enjoy the food I make at home, you know, once you eliminate all the food that's not really food that used to give you a dopamine hit, the stuff you're going to eat is just not that great. So I will tell you that's kind of a sad part of it. But but I have had, there are a couple restaurants that have really good, there is one restaurant that's like a really good salad, and they have like a roasted, you know, like a roast, Sprinkles is upset. A roasted meat appetizer kind of thing. And so I'm able to get kind of the protein I need on my salad plus that, plus the veggie. And they give you like a salad that's in a huge bowl, and that works. But yeah, you need to be careful at first that you're not going to be triggered to cheat. You need to probably not go to restaurants that might have had a particular food that you know is going to really tempt you. And it's like, oh, when I go to that place, you know, that I always had the whatever.
Right.
And then you need to be careful about when you're eating out with others. Because they're going to eat what they eat.
People.
There's the food pusher, and then there's also I don't want the fact that I'm not eating those things to make someone else feel like they can't eat those things. So by the time I did go out to eat, I was very solid in my food. I wasn't tempted or triggered by what was at the restaurant. And I was able to say, oh, I don't have that, but oh my gosh, you know, I'm not actually even feeling it anymore. Like, oh, that looks delicious. And, you know, that looks great. And just help them feel comfortable, because I don't want people to feel weird, like, you know, I don't want them to feel like they're going to trigger me. Right. Like, it's kind of like if you are a recovering alcoholic.
Yes.
And your friends know you are, they're going to tend to not drink around you, and which is wonderful and kind. And so, but I don't want people to feel that way about their food. Like, it's a very personal choice that we're making to not eat sugar or flour, and I don't want people to feel that they can't have those things if that's not their journey.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to also say, though, that as you develop this identity of a Bright Lifer, that you have to be willing to advocate for yourself. So even in a restaurant, because the reality is that you don't know the answer until you ask, first and foremost, and that you might not see something that you think that you need on a menu, but that if you talk to somebody that you might be able to get that thing. And I will tell you, I'm amazed at how many things I'm like, well, can you do this instead of this? And they're like, of course, you know, and it's like, oh, okay. You know, like, can I get cauliflower rice instead of regular rice? Like that sort of a thing.
Or can you not put like a pound of butter on top of the meat?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think just, you know, being an advocate for yourself, knowing that this is the way you eat and having this identity is really, you know, really an important factor in all this. And just understanding that if you're going to pay for a meal, you know, that you need to get what you need to get what you want. And I don't think, you know, to me, it's like, I don't go out to eat near as much as I used to for sure. Because again, I totally agree with Bonnie. It's not as enjoyable of an experience. And a lot of times, you know, my mastermind group and I joke about this, but it's like we only get food 3 times a day. So we want it to be good. You know, we don't want it to not be good. And you don't want to go to a restaurant where you don't have control of everything and then get a bad meal. And then you're like, well, that's it. That was my dinner.
That.
Well, not even I paid for that, but that's my dinner. Like there's no more food after this, no matter what. So I think that that's another thing to really consider and be mindful of is, going to place, finding some restaurants if you do like to go out to eat, or if that's something that is part of your life or social finding restaurants that have what you need, but then, I'm kind of the same way. Like there's a few restaurants I go to, they have some really good go-to stuff that I'm like, yep, I know I can go there. I know I can get this. I know it's going to be good. But other than that, yeah, and also I will say when you're new to this and you're starting going out to restaurants, I mean, there's a whole module on the boot camp about this, about like how to do that, how to navigate that, but look at the menu before you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I cannot emphasize that enough. It's like, it will make your life so much easier. And I think that there is so many pitfalls to making a decision in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
So like, well, but I think,
it goes back to when we talked about, having your emergency action plan. Right?
Yes.
Don't just show up at a restaurant. I'm like, I'm just going to figure this out on
Well,
the
but I
fly.
just think even perusing the menu can be triggering.
Yeah.
And so like, that's the thing, is that like, you need to know yourself well enough that, for me, it's like, I always try and look at the menu before I go, just because I want to know what my options are and how I can navigate that. And then in that moment, like I can just live with that decision.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that, it's definitely workable. You can make eating out part of, bright line eating, but, I think planning and prep is still has to be part of it. So.
And one thing that you were talking about, right? The willingness to ask your wait staff, can I trade out this instead of that? And I'm thinking of the times that we've all gone out to eat together. We've never had a situation where the wait staff has seemed to feel like we were bothering them by asking for. They've always been so gracious about wanting to figure out what is it that we want or don't want.
Most restaurants are very sensitive to food allergies, and if you don't want to, you don't have to say I'm on this weird food plan. I usually just say, I have some food sensitivities, and do you have this?
Sure.
I actually am allergic to milk protein, so it's kind of dramatic for me on that department.
We went out for my birthday, and I remember saying, I think she put the bread down on the table, and I was like, no, go ahead, take that away, because my husband and I had already talked about it, and he was like, he's like, I don't need it, we could just not even put it on the table. And she was like, oh, are you allergic? And I was like, no, but, and I was like, do I really need to go into this with the waitress? And I did. I said, I'm not eating flour or sugar. And she's like,
I know.
No flour or sugar? Yes, no flour or sugar.
It's like that My Big Fat Greek Wedding. No meat. It's okay. I make lamb.
I make lamb.
You can't have that. I'll bring you the wheat bread then.
Exactly.
Right.
So, I think that's, I agree. Like, there's no need to, you don't, there's enough people that eat.
Right.
I mean, and I guess we're also very fortunate because we live where we live, like on the West Coast, where I feel like there's a lot of people who eat vegetarian and vegan.
There's more
and
acceptance of
gluten-free.
people with food issues.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying other places are not. Don't hear me wrong. I grew up in the Midwest, guys. So like, I get it. But I just feel like here there's a lot. I feel like there's more options. And that people are more accepting of like that's just not something I eat or whatever the case might be. And there's you don't have to do much explaining. It's just like nope. That's
no
not.
is a complete sentence.
It is a complete sentence. Absolutely.
That's a great wisdom bomb to drop on.
Yeah, that is a great wisdom. Bears repeating. Go ahead, Robin.
No is a complete sentence. All I have to say is no, thank you. I don't eat that.
Yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts about food prep? Any other things that you feel like have come up in your program? Or I think planning is the biggest thing.
Yeah, plan ahead. Think about your budget. I get it. Food's expensive.
Yeah.
So, like Meagan mentioned, you don't have to have fresh raw vegetables to start with. Canned is fine. Frozen is fine. Buy in bulk is fine.
Yeah.
I'll buy large bags of mixed vegetables, and I just cut a hole, dump out what I need, and put a rubber band on the rest, and come back to that well whenever I need to.
Yeah.
I have, if I've made a plan and then something has gone wrong, like we forgot to go to the grocery store or whatever, again, I have that reserve of mixed frozen vegetables. I also, when we cook in bulk in our meats, I will frequently set aside a portion of meat. I pre-weigh it and I label it for, like today I had lunch, 4 ounces of brisket.
Yeah.
And so I just put that in the freezer. And so when I have a day where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't plan last night, or I made a plan, but I didn't realize we didn't have that.
Right.
I just have stuff pre-weighed and measured. I can just pull it out, and in 5 minutes, I've got lunch.
So an emergency food plan.
Yeah, an emergency food plan.
And I will say, like, there has been, I think that there's been twice, and so I've been doing this for like 9 months now. There's been twice when it was like, something went awry.
Yeah.
Right.
And after the first time, I was like, okay, I'm never going to have this happen again. So I made sure I had some things that were like shelf stable things that I could pull out, especially protein, because I think that's the hardest thing thing. Like, I mean, normally like, yeah, with vegetables and fruit, like
Yep.
cans or frozen or whatever. But I think also thinking about some like, you know, some shelf stable protein items.
My sister does those
Yeah.
roasted, salted, dried edamame.
Yeah,
In a bag, and that's just like you know,
chickpeas.
if you've got to go run
Yeah.
errands, like for us, we live remotely, so if we're gonna go run errands, it's an event,
it's a
and so we might get stuck away from home for a while, and so I have had it happen. Like I went to go pick up somebody from the airport, their flight was delayed, and I was planning on getting back, and having my meal, and now I'm stuck in an area where there's only fast food. And I literally just found the closest grocery store, went into the deli, got some fresh deli meat, bought an apple and a
Right.
bag of carrots, and that was my lunch.
Yeah.
Like, you
Right.
don't have to, you know, but like Meagan said, like planning ahead, having some emergency protein, like you're going to travel, you're going to, you know, whatever. I mean,
I know a lot of people that travel
yeah.
with like,
and we
you
can
know,
have a whole discussion, probably a whole nother
Right.
podcast on travel.
on travel for sure.
But yeah, bottom line is be as prepared as you
Yeah,
can.
be prepared.
But don't feel overwhelmed by food prep. Don't feel overwhelmed by the time it takes to cook, because
Yeah.
trust me, it takes less time to cook a fresh
Yep.
meal than it does to drive to a restaurant, wait to be served, eat, and then wait for your
Yeah.
check, and then drive home.
And I think whatever makes sense for your life, like that's the other thing, that there is no prescribed way
Yeah.
to do this other than no sugar, no flour, 3 weighed portions, you know, weighed meal portions a
Right.
day. Like that is the prescription to the BLE
Right.
plan. There is no other, as far as like, you know, what you eat, how you eat it, how you prepare it, all those things, that has to make sense for your lifestyle. And I think that that's the beauty of Bright Line Eating, is that it can make sense for your lifestyle. I don't do it the same way that Bonnie does
Yeah,
it.
right.
And that's because our lifestyles are different,
Yep.
and that's fine. And I think that we just,
And the things that trigger us are different, and the
Absolutely.
right, all those things. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
Well, I think that that is our episode for today on food, and thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.